Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. My name is Sean, and I am glad you are here. Gene therapy treatments have the potential to have a profound impact on many rare disease communities. However, the potentially permanent nature of these treatments present unique considerations for any participant in a clinical trial. So when Kyle and I were presented with the opportunity to moderate a panel with people who have actually participated in gene therapy trials, we didn't even hesitate. Not only are Jordan, Kim, and Darren extremely open and helpful about the topic, they are wonderful pioneers that set an incredible example for the entire rare community. We moderated this virtual panel for AVROBIO, who aims to halt or reverse disease with a single dose of gene therapy. Their goal is simple and powerful, aimed to enable individuals with genetic disease to live longer, free from disease progression, free from painful and debilitating symptoms, and free from the burden of chronic treatment regimens. This panel was one of the ways AVROBIO is seeking to understand the patient journey in order to inform the development of their treatments. We found this conversation enlightening and heartfelt, and we hope it's the same for you.
Hello, everyone. It's with great pleasure that we welcome Sean and Kyle from the Two Disabled Dudes podcast to AVROBIO. My name is Jeff Mackay, and I co-founded the company in 2015 with the vision of bringing personalized gene therapy to patients and families worldwide. The AVRO team is made up of experts in cell and gene therapy, as well as lysosomal disorders. And we have a deep passion for science and, above all, a commitment to keeping patients and families at the center of everything that we do. In a busy world, one way we honor that commitment is by listening to those who live every day with rare conditions and seeking to understand the unique experiences and complex needs of individuals and families. That's why today's discussion is so important to me and our whole team. What we learn through these conversations tangibly contributes to our understanding of how best to develop our investigational gene therapies. In addition, hearing the stories of individuals and their families energizes and motivates our team to push forward, work through challenges, and never settle. On behalf of everyone at AVROBIO, I want to say thank you to Kyle and Sean for virtually visiting us and helping us learn from brave pioneers like Darren, Jordan, and Kim, who are among the first to participate or have their child participate in clinical trials of novel medicines for lysosomal disorders.
The therapies referenced in this podcast are investigational, which means they've not yet been approved by the FDA or any other regulatory agency. Researchers are currently evaluating their safety and efficacy in clinical trials.
Hello, I'm Fernanda Copeland, Executive Director of Patient Advocacy and Engagement at AVROBIO. We are very excited to sponsor today's program here with Kyle and Sean, creators of the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We'll also be meeting with three members of the lysosomal community, Darren, Jordan, and Kim. Each of them have faced extraordinary circumstances, including to participate in a clinical trial, which takes bravery to choose to participate in treatment for novel therapies such as gene therapy. We've got an awesome and inspiring panel today. On behalf of AVROBIO, we are so thankful that you guys are doing this with us today. So thank you and welcome Kyle and Sean and the panelists to this AVROBIO family and program. So take it away.
Thanks so much, Fernanda. We really, really appreciate being here. We're excited about the conversation. I was diagnosed with a disease called Friedreich's ataxia when I was 17 years old. I've learned through the years to see myself as me and not as my disease. Sean and I both have the FA, but we really connect about our willingness to look beyond our circumstances and really live life to the fullest. So like Kyle said, both diagnosed with FA. Mine was a later onset, so I wasn't diagnosed till I was 25. What Kyle and I believe the panelists believe in wholeheartedly is doing everything we can in the years that we do have, or in the time that we do have. We're all going to face challenges, whether it's a rare disease or physical disability or loss of a loved one, or just some financial hardships or heartbreak. We're all going to have rough days in life, and how we respond to those rough days define who we are and what we can do. And it's the tenacity of our rare disease community that inspires Kyle and I to keep going, and fuels the tenacity that I think you'll hear a little bit today. I would like to kick it off to our panelists and allow Darren, Jordan, and Kim to introduce themselves. So, Kim, if you don't mind, we're going to go ladies first. Will you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I'm Kim Stevens. I am the mother of a boy with Hunter syndrome, and we'll talk more about that. And I'm also president of Project Live. It's an organization dedicated to research and advocacy for Hunter syndrome. And you told me I was supposed to say something about myself, and that's interesting. You have to think hard when you're like so focused on your child and trying to save them. I my getaways, the thing for me is I like to go run or walk. Trying to get away from my computer and just have that little bit of quiet time. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I listened to podcasts the entire time. So I don't know if that's really taking a break or not. So you can tell me.
Is our podcast in your playlist or no? Be honest.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
We would encourage more running. Yeah. Darren, would you mind telling us a little bit about you? Thank you, Kim.
Certainly. So my name is Darren Badalka. I've been married for 21 years to my wife, Lisa. We have no children, so we don't have some of the challenges that that brings, and have been able to focus more on sort of my health and ourselves. We enjoy the great outdoors. We hike and bike and ski and do all that kind of fun stuff. Have great family and friends. Professionally, I'm an accountant, and basically I do restructuring work. So for the U.S. context, I'll go into something where companies in Chapter 11 and try and help them survive. So that's sort of my professional career. In terms of why I'm on this panel, I've got Fabry disease, was diagnosed at 36, and I'm currently 52.
Thank you, Darren. All right, Jordan, you're up, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm Jordan Yonts, and I was diagnosed with cystinosis at 8 months old. I'm currently 22. I'm a very active person. I've always been active. I love the outdoors. I moved out of my parents' house when I was 19, and I bought my own house. I work in the oil field right now, but I'm actually switching careers. And since I got a stem cell transplant in October of 2019, I actually decided to go to school and do something for myself for once. So I'm going to school in September.
Beautiful. So, Jordan, I want to stick with you for a minute. I have a question, and it's something that we talked about in our first meeting, because I admittedly freaked out a little bit because I've been following Dr. Stephanie Cherokee for a number of years, because she is beginning to develop therapy for Friedreich's ataxia, but her therapy right now is being used, the same technique is being used for cystinosis, and you were the first one to be treated with that technique. And so it has a lot of implications, obviously, for all the people in your community, but even beyond that, of course, right? And so how does it feel to be a pioneer in this space that is going to have implications for so many people?
Yeah. So at the start, I was very scared, I guess. Like, I didn't want to be the first one, but at the same time, I didn't really have a choice. It was because I'm from Canada. It was hard. That might be my only chance to get a cure. And my mom explained it like there's a tornado at the front door and a tsunami at the back door. Which one do you pick? Because if I try this treatment and it doesn't work, I go back to on my pills and continue on with my life. If it does work, I live a healthy, happy life. But if I don't try and do it, then I will be getting a kidney transplant at, 25 or going downhill and might not live till I'm 40 or 50. So to be a pioneer, I guess, now that I went through it, I'm very, I guess, grateful, and somebody had to do it. So I'm glad I did it, because I think it would be hard for people that had a very hard mindset, I guess. Like, I was very strong-minded going into it, and maybe it was a little easier for me.
Have you received communications from your community or from people outside the community thanking you for putting yourself out there and getting it done, or asking you about what your experience was like, all that stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I know when it finally went out there and my name went out there that I received the stem cell transplant, I was getting text messages off Facebook from all over the world. There was a couple that emailed or texted me from Brazil. And then I got gifts from Australia, like getting mailed to San Diego in our hotel mailbox. I got Calgary Flames signed jerseys, and everyone just thanking me and giving me gifts. And it really made my day better, because I was stuck in a hotel. So it was like Christmas for 3 months, basically every day there was something to open.
That's crazy. At least you were stuck in a hotel in San Diego, right?
Yeah, San Diego was very beautiful. It was nice to walk around there.
Hey, would you guys mind, Jordan, we'll start with you and we'll work our way back. For some participants or viewers, just a quick glimpse of how cystinosis affects you today, or maybe how it did a couple of years ago. What are some of the symptoms that you're up against?
Yeah, so before the stem cell transplant, I was always very active. I was always compliant with my pills, always drank lots of water. So I didn't have as harsh as symptoms as other people did. I did have kidney failure, though. My kidney's sitting around 40%. I noticed that with other kids my age, I was a little weaker, but that's why I worked out all the time, because I wanted to try and prove myself to other kids my age. I had a smell, I guess, from the pills, and nobody really said anything because they were all pretty close friends of mine. But there was some people that didn't know me that asked what that smell was, and some people would say it smelled like rotten milk or cheese. And for some reason, that just really got to me. That was probably the hardest thing about my disease. And I had a bad photophobia. I still have photophobia, but not as bad as before. And I'd say I feel the same now than as before. I'm still working out lots because I was always very fit, but I don't have that pill smell, which I love. It makes me more confident, for sure.
I bet. Thank you. Darren, what are some of the things you've been up against with Fabry?
Sure. So Fabry disease is a lysosomal storage disorder, as was mentioned, and it's basically affects every cell in the body. It seems to kind of pick three to sort of 5 areas that most dramatically impact people. And I'm going to speak a little bit from sort of the whole community's perspective, because there's a real range of how people are impacted. So the big ones are also kidney failure, also heart failure, as was mentioned by Kyle, and strokes. So those are kind of the big 3 that are the most sort of frightening. And then there tends to be a lot of extremity pain for people, as well as a lot of gastrointestinal challenges. I'm fortunate that all the way through, I've been, I'd say, on the lighter end of the spectrum. So there's certainly challenges, but it's not as bad as I've certainly met many, many people. And that's kind of a point I often make when you're doing things like this, is you're meeting the people that are well enough to actually participate in a panel, as opposed to the ones that aren't well enough to be participating. So for me, gastrointestinal, absolutely. The pain, not so much. Kidney function is down somewhat. Heart function is definitely down. And so far, no evidence of strokes.
And Kim, thank you, Darren. Kim, what are some things you and your family are up against with Cole?
Yeah, so Cole was diagnosed at 2.5, and he's now almost 11. So we've gone through a lot over the years. So Hunter syndrome, like what Darren said, is a lysosomal storage disease, and he's missing an enzyme that takes waste out of his body, and otherwise it builds up and affects the major organs. And there's sort of a spectrum for Hunter syndrome, with some boys being affected cognitively. In fact, 2 out of 3 boys, and then others not as affected cognitively. Unfortunately, Cole has a severe form. So we've seen a progressive decline that usually starts at around 2 or 3. And that's when a lot of boys are diagnosed, because you start to see that decline, their speech. Cole has lost speech now. He lost speech about 2 or 3 years ago. So he is nonverbal. He has some hydrocephalus, intracranial pressure. So he's taking medicine to try to keep that pressure down so he doesn't have constant headaches on that. His heart is majorly affected. So he has a murmur and some regurgitation, as our cardiologist likes to remind us every time we go. And there's some joint pain that we're seeing as well. So he really, all of his body, but he wouldn't know it just by being around him, because he's the happiest little kid and, runs around. He knows his limitations really well. He's lucky because he's part of a clinical trial, and he's been part of a clinical trial for the past 6 years. So he can do a lot more than boys that have not been in the clinical trial. But, after we go on a walk, for a long walk, he does 2 and 3 mile walks. He's obviously in pain. He's a toe walker. So that walking flat really causes him some pain. So we do a lot of massage and CBD oil. And then with the behavior problems, if we're talking more widely, our family affects us because we just, we don't go out in public as much as we might, because people don't understand. He doesn't understand danger, so he's going to run out into traffic or, just take off running, and he's really, really fast. So you've got to be ready and on at all times. So that's been challenging. And then, of course, having a child that's nonverbal gets to be really difficult and frustrating for his older brother, because he doesn't understand why he doesn't communicate. And it's hard for Cole because he gets frustrated because he can't communicate.
Darren, you mentioned all the symptoms of Fabry, and you decided to go this gene therapy route. And there's a balance, right? Risk benefit. And how did that go in your mind when you were trying to decide to get into a gene therapy trial, when you're weighing the risks and benefits?
You'll gather I'm a pretty analytical person. So it wasn't just in my mind, it was written down and discussed with my wife and others. So I'm very much what are the pros and cons? What are the risks? And what are the things a person can do to try and mitigate those risks? And I think this is a very key point, is there's do something, and the alternative is do nothing. And as Jordan said about the hurricane and the tsunami, same idea. Fabry disease is a progressive disease. You're trying to take the slope of the decline that we all have, everybody, and you're trying to make it less and less steep. So if you did nothing with Fabry disease, you're probably looking at kidney failure in your 40s, and you're probably, as a male, dead before 60. With the available treatments, it's way better. Long term, we don't exactly know. But the stroke risk isn't really dealt with, it seems, because of the blood-brain barrier. So there's a bunch of risks to doing nothing. On the other side, I participated in the research for this trial before it got to the human stage. I kind of knew what the results of that research was. So that encouraged me. I looked through all the risks and determined that really the key one to me was I'm going to have really low immunity after the chemo. How do I manage that? And decided that I thought that between my wife and I, we could adequately manage that, and probably better than most people, because I don't have children, so I'm not introducing the risk of them and their friends. I don't have pets. So there's a lot of ways that I've actually got a life that kind of lined up pretty well with doing this. And then at the end of the day, long discussions with the doctors and the other medical professionals, decided that the risks of doing something were better than the risks of doing nothing.
I think that's something that we all are up against with, especially with rare disease. It's not like there's 25 different options that we have, it's like
Exactly.
Do this or do nothing. And I really like the way you put that.
Darren, with the experiences that you have, what are you doing to help educate others in your community? Obviously, you've kind of alluded to the trials and what you've experienced being somewhat successful. So how are you helping others in the community explore the options that might be available or considerations?
Sure. Well, I guess there's this. I was pretty active in patient advocacy from 2006, which is just after I was diagnosed, through to 2015. So that I put a lot of my kind of heart and soul into that. And then frankly, I've taken a bit of a step back since then. And then I went and participated in this trial, which was a fair commitment. I do stay in contact with the Canadian Fabry Association. I've written a newsletter for them that talk about the experiences. I'm participating in this today. So I'm doing some of that. I'm certainly less active in being kind of out there, and I don't do Facebook. I'm not a social media guy. I just can't find the time. So through something like this, I hope that people will learn something and it'll be helpful to them. And I've talked to probably most of the patients, at least in Canada, that did this trial before they participated.
Ken, that kind of tees it up for you, I think, because you mentioned Project Alive and how that organization is focused on funding research. So with that in mind, what's your hope in that science or the research?
So my great big hope is to save all the boys that have Hunter syndrome, and we know just through the years, the progression of the disease, that different boys are going to need different types of science, and they're what they have, that they can reach what's accessible to them. And I often get this question in our community because we now have a couple of choices, which is amazing. That which one should I go with? Which trials should I try for? And really, I have to step back and say, well, which one's right in front of you? With a progressive disease, you don't really have that luxury of sitting back and waiting to see what's the outcome of this trial, or maybe this one is better than that one. You really have to take exactly what's available in front of you and what works best for your family. And that's what I tell everyone, because I want all of them to work. That's my hope. I want every single one of them to work, because I know we've got to save different boys. And each one is going to be, some of the clinical trials take more involvement, like Darren has said, and some others, you've got a weekly involvement, and you might have to move across the country or to another country. So you really have to weigh all those different things. And so part of our role in Project Alive, and my role, is really to talk with families and give them all the opportunities and bring them face to face with the specialists so they can make those decisions as they're getting into this disease. And an interesting thing that I'm finding is the parents that I consider myself an old parent, and not because of my age, but just because my child is 10. And in the Hunter syndrome world, that is when boys die at 15, I have an older child, and I'm seeing very different decisions being made in the older cohorts, because we know we've seen the progression of the disease. So where there's more of an urgency almost to get involved in a clinical trial. And also because there's been a big lag between the trial that Cole enrolled in and what's available now. So there's this big gap of like 5 or 6 years where kids didn't have a clinical trial. And there's a difference between the ones that are just newly diagnosed when they're like, well, which one should I choose? And again, it's trying to convey that urgency to them, but it's not as top of mind because they haven't seen the progression yet. So there's a lot of diversity in our community that way, and just really trying to have the right conversation with the right people and give them the information they need.
There's this concept, the therapeutic window. When is the best time for us to give this treatment? And usually we're thinking it's probably pretty young, right? The younger, especially with gene therapy, the younger it seems like the better. And so what's your perspective on exclusion criteria and what ages should be targeted in clinical trials?
Yeah, that's a hot topic for me, Kyle. You just teed me up for one of my passion topics. Ideally, if we're being realistic, pharmaceutical companies, they need to target early, right? And they need to halt some of the progression of the disease. And I get that piece. And they want to show that the product works, and they need to go to the FDA and show that the product works again. And we all know early intervention is going to have a better outcome. But what I try to get companies to look at is, okay, but look at, for instance, my child who's nonverbal. What if something that you developed could make them have some of their words back, even a few words, just like mommy? I would be ecstatic, and it's amazing. Or what if something helped them walk a little bit better? They're not going to get out and run a marathon, but perhaps they're able to get out of their wheelchair and support themselves. These are all amazing results. And just trying to sort of think about it in a different sort of context as a treatment option, as opposed to what Darren and I have talked about, a cure, right? A cure would mean that we are coming in and we're fixing all of the past damage that's being done for older children. Well, we're not thinking about a cure in that sense. If we have older kids, if we have, older adults receiving the treatment, we're thinking about the quality of life right now, where we are right now, either staying where it is or getting better. And we're happy with that because we know that the disease is on a downward decline, as Darren said, and we're trying to stave that off. So I want trials for everybody, all ages.
It sounds like the benefit may be different, but it's still a benefit no matter who it is.
That's exactly right. No exclusion criteria.
So for the sake of our viewers and AVROBIO, Kim just gave you a massive challenge, right?
Yeah.
Jordan, I want to throw it back to you and get your voice in here a little bit more. Let's get a little personal because, like I said, you've always been active and you're feeling pretty good and you're going to school and you're working. So on that personal side, what do you hope to accomplish in the next 10 years or, God willing, like 70 years?
That is a good question. Now that I switched careers and I'm going to school, I'm actually going to school for it's a butchery and charcuterie management course. And I've always been interested in food and making product. And I'm hoping to own my own business one day. I think after school, I'll go work and get experience. And then down the road, open up my own place, I think. And so hopefully in 10 years, I'll have my own business. And I actually have a girlfriend and she's going to school for physiotherapy. So that's going to be like 7-8 years for her. And then hopefully one day we'll, I guess, meet up and move in together. But I don't know. It's hard to plan that far ahead, but for sure own my own business one day.
I feel like we can all probably agree. Even, I just turned 40 recently and Darren told us his age. I can't even plan the next 10 years. So I don't blame you there.
Jordan, with all of that in mind, how has cystinosis affected your career choices and your ability to sustain yourself financially? As we all know, there's a lot of associated expenses with any health condition. And so how has that affected your ability to sustain yourself and choose to go after your dreams?
Before my stem cell transplant, I was taking like 54 pills a day, and my Procysbi I was on, it costed about $400,000 a year, but I live in Canada and I have insurance, thank goodness. But the only reason I get insurance is because I work with a really good company. And as soon as I got hired there and got insurance, I was basically like, okay, this is my career for the rest of my life. I'm just going to work here. I got insurance. I can't leave this place. And now that I don't take 54 pills a day, I think I take 20, 23 or 24 pills a day now. And they're basically just like supplement pills, like your potassium, sodium, stuff like that for my kidney. And I don't have that worry, I guess. If I don't have insurance to cover pills, I know I'm going to be fine because my other pills don't cost very much. And so that's why I decided to change careers, because now I have that ability to do something that I want to do now.
That's the ultimate freedom of life, right? Doing what you want to do. That's amazing.
Darren, Jordan mentioned, and we even talked about, he was the first one to go through the trial that he did a couple of years ago. And we know that's a similar story for you. What are some of your thoughts around being a part of that pioneering? We know companies like AVROBIO are on the cutting edge, right? And they're trying to get to the finish line for a lot of different people and conditions. You've been a part of that pioneering experience, and I'm curious what that means for you, or how that speaks to you internally.
It speaks strongly. So I think people don't often get the opportunity to do what Jordan and I have done, where you had that opportunity to hopefully make a difference. So I think that's something to be cherished. I also had a bit of a closing window. I was 48 when I participated, and the cutoff was 50. So I certainly consider myself fortunate to have had the opportunity, because if I'd waited, I may have missed the window. It's been really a fabulous experience. Once you kind of get past the whole fact that, that I took chemo and they took like an awful lot of blood from me and all that sort of stuff, this has been really fascinating. Like, you don't normally in your life get an opportunity to deal with the sorts of folks that I've got to deal with through this trial. Like, how many people get to meet a researcher who pioneered something like gene therapy in the condition that not a whole lot of people have, or the number of absolutely committed medical people. Like, there's any research study, there is a gigantic team of people that are involved who are all doing this for the most part, not for a whole lot of extra money. They're doing it because they really are passionate about trying to help people, and they happen to have chosen people that have rare disorders. So, a giant thank you to all of them. So I did something, yes, but really when you kind of break it into all sorts of little pieces, the only thing that was truly, truly unique was it was for Fabry disease. Because there's been plenty of people do chemo, sadly, way too many people have done chemo. Plenty of people have done apheresis, not a terribly, risky endeavor. There really is only a fairly small piece, and that was part of my analysis.
Kim, I'm going to throw one to you, and Darren, you previously had a few thoughts on this as well, but just about the expectations for the outcomes of gene therapy. We all think that it's going to be the ultimate cure, and it's going to make us win the lottery and stuff like that, and solve all the problems of life. And so how do you think about that? And also, how do you communicate that to your community?
Yeah, so, we talked a little bit about it previously. It's really thinking of gene therapy and where are you starting? For those kids that we might get at 6 months, the expectation is that they won't show signs of the disease. Because we start to see that it's a progressive disease, and we start to see, the problems with the ears, and then it starts to your spleen and all, and so it just, all those parts, we won't see those with gene therapy, because the idea would be you were getting the enzyme that you're missing. Now, for our older boys, there's pretty much almost everyone's on enzyme replacement therapy. That's the standard of care now for our kids. So they start that as soon as they're diagnosed. But again, that might be 2 to 3 years old for some of our boys that are attenuated. It might be even later. So again, the damage has already been going on for months or years. And for those they're gonna, it's not gonna repair the damage. Like Cole, for instance, he has heart damage where his valves stay open. He's had aortic valve replacement surgery. So if he does get gene therapy, it's not going to help that part. But what it could help is help him to develop the enzyme that he's missing so that he, hopefully would not do the weekly enzyme replacement therapy, which would be a huge piece because our whole life revolves around that enzyme replacement therapy. It would mean he wouldn't be going and getting a lumbar puncture every month so that he can get the enzyme he's missing to his brain. So really thinking about what are the expectations for each individual child, because there's not some sort of broad statement we can kind of make because all the kids are at different points and there's different progression of the disease. And so that's really what I try to communicate to the community is trying to understand their expectations and manage their expectations. And surely we want to be very hopeful and we think it's a great treatment. And, a lot of people want to get that for their child, but also understanding it's not something that's going to fix damage that's already been done to the body. So, and Darren had something more on that too as well.
I would agree with all of that. And I guess what have I done to try and manage expectations? I've always talked about it. So like I said, I was fairly heavily involved in patient advocacy for about 10 years and was president of the Canadian Fabry Association for a bunch of those. So I got to stand in front of the group, quite a number of times and to promote research and then also take the opportunity to try and manage expectations of, yes, we're hopeful that gene therapy will eventually happen. And then once it does happen, let's, remember that, it's going to start as a safety study. The only thing that they're trying to do at the first round is make sure they don't hurt anybody. Efficacy is a later stage goal in clinical trials. Now, hallelujah, we got efficacy that appears in the first trial. So that's awesome. And, I'm 4 years in and appear to still be doing well. So that's good. There was a tremendous amount of sort of anticipation for that first trial and what are the results. So I was getting plenty of questions on it. And that's why I chose to write this newsletter article for Canadian Fabry Association. That was probably in the first couple of paragraphs. We need to balance hope, because hope's important, with reality of this isn't going to fix everything. It might fix things and take that decline that I've talked about and shallow it for me. And if you're much younger, maybe it's going to be much shallower, but it's not going to fix damage already done to kidneys and heart, and it's not going to help you win the lottery and those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's wonderful perspective. I mean, even just for me also, as I've learned more and more about gene therapy, I've had to modify my expectations. And I think as we do that, we help others around us modify theirs as well.
We all know that treatments and the possibility of cures can take decades and billions of dollars, right? There's no quick fix for sure. And I have really two questions. I'll throw out the first question that we'll wrap up with. And knowing that research takes a long time and a lot of money, I want you guys to, all three of you, put on that researcher science hat. Let's say you're the genius behind the curtain and you're working away at fixing what you're up against or what your child's up against in Kim's case. How would you remain focused and motivated in the work you do? And I'll throw this to Darren first.
Okay. Probably start with, I don't know. Dr. Medine worked on this thing for, 25 years. I can't imagine working for 25 years. But I'll put the analytical hat back on. What did I see him do? He participated in, I think, most every Canadian Fabry Association patient conference. He had guys like me kind of continuing to talk to him, and where I could, I was supporting either through donating bits of body or writing letters of support. He invited people to come and see his lab and introduce the patients to his team, because it's certainly not just one person, it's a big team. So you could see that, I think that helped re-engage, or not re-engage is the wrong word, helped engage them, because they got to meet people that actually have the condition and see them. So I think those are probably all helpful aspects, but a huge thank you to all those folks that did stay committed for 25 years for our benefit.
Thank you. Jordan, we'll throw that one to you next. You've had the privilege of meeting all kinds of folks throughout your journey. If you were them, how would you remain motivated?
I became close with a lot of people down there. I know you're technically not supposed to be friends, but I consider a lot of, the scientists down there. And even there was like 25-year-olds that were taking my blood, and I'm 22 years old. So like we kind of became friends. And I guess I would want to stay motivated because I would want the best for my patient, and I would want them to be cured. I couldn't, seeing me being them and seeing what the patient goes through every day, I couldn't imagine seeing that person go through needles and blood work and basically testing every ounce of bodily fluids they can distribute.
Kim, how would you answer that?
Yeah, so I speak with a lot of different pharmaceutical companies because I want them to stay motivated. That putting your child in front of their face and say, this is what you're working towards. And I think it's easy to get disconnected if you're working in the lab and you're not seeing patients. So they need to connect with us. And as Jordan said, I am friends with so many people that I've over the years that I've encountered and talked to, and they've met Cole, or they've met some of our other boys and just fallen in love with them, and that's okay. I want them to do that, right? I want them to be working, and I want them to be thinking about, this is for Cole, this is for Jack, this is for these kids that I'm doing these sorts of things, and think about, and I often say when I speak to companies is, you're doing such important work. It's so, how many people get to go to work every day and say, what I'm doing is going to save a life. This is really meaningful. This is something, and you're not just punching a time clock. You're really making a difference. And if you have a bad day, that's going to be reflected in maybe that cure doesn't get moved along, or that treatment doesn't get moved along quite as fast. So really trying to stay motivated. Put pictures of the patients up so that you can see those and know that we're counting on you. And just thinking about that. And I always say whenever I leave a company, I was like, thank you so much for all that you're doing. We appreciate it, but move faster, because we're depending on you. And I want them to know that, there's not research I can do myself, but they can do something to make a big difference. And we're the biggest cheerleaders for them. So, if we could get in their labs and do cheers, we would do that daily, but they probably wouldn't let us, right?
They might get tired of us. And I think, Kim, to your point, every day informs the next day, right? So even though sometimes you might feel like you're just punching the clock, the few things you accomplish today just help us move the needle for somebody next year or 10 years from now. So I love that you talk about that. And I know Fernanda's about to come back on and kick us out, and we do have a couple questions coming in, but I want to wrap up with one last question for the three of you before Fernanda takes over. And Kim, we'll start with you. Putting your mom hat back on, or your own hat back on, how would you encourage, or what would your advice be for other families considering participation in gene therapy?
Yeah, I never take my mom hat off, Sean. So it's always
Fair.
on. I'd like
Fair.
to every once in a while. But, you know, I think you have to think about where you are right now and how that impacts your family. I'm not one to ever sit back, so it's hard for me to sort of put myself in a position where I'm contemplating, because if there's something out there that's going to help my child, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to be like Darren and do my research and be very analytical about it. And that's one of the things I would tell a family, get involved, understand what this treatment is, how it's going to affect your child, and ask questions. Get to know the researchers. A lot of the times that's difficult because the specialists are far away, but I think with like telehealth, that's helped a lot, where you can really reach the specialists because they're all so wonderful, especially in our area. But you'd be surprised how many people don't reach out to the specialists because they just think that they're just not accessible to them. And that's really not been my experience at all. So I would encourage people to really get involved, and get involved in your community, because it's so helpful to have that community supporting you and encouraging. And it's really, really will get you through a lot of tough times.
Yeah. Thank you. Darren, how would you encourage others, or what would your advice be for those considering gene therapy trial?
Well, I'd echo all of the sentiments we just heard from Kim. I think I'd go on to say, and to repeat maybe a couple, participate in patient conferences, like get to know your community. There's a whole bunch of benefits to doing that. These are rare diseases, but to know that you're not alone, I think is powerful for people. I'd say volunteer for research. I say this all the time, but like, we are a small community. Please, if others didn't do research before us, we wouldn't have the treatments that we have available to us. So please participate in research. And then I'd say try and help in other ways as well. Like, I wrote letters of support for the research and for funding grants and those sorts of things. So I think that's important. And maybe a final sort of self sort of reflection thing is, would you want to help you? So be the kind of person that people want to help.
That's good. Beautiful. Thank you, Darren. Jordan, we're going to give you the last word here. How would you encourage, or what would your advice be for those considering gene therapy trial?
Well, don't be afraid to reach out to people. Like, I know when I was considering it, I sit down with your family and talk about it. Look at the benefits, look at the not benefits, and reach out. Like, I know there was hundreds of people reaching out to me that were considering it, and they wanted to know what was the worst thing that I went through and what was the best thing and how am I feeling. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out.
It's that connection that really drives the whole community forward, I think. So thank you for highlighting that.
You've all been wonderful. Thank you for entertaining questions from Colin and I. Fernanda, thank you for allowing us to be a part. I know you've got some questions coming in, so we'll follow your lead here. We realize the vital part that companies like AVROBIO play in our journeys with rare disease, and we are incredibly grateful for folks like Jordan and Kim and Darren, who are willing to be a part of the process of drug trial and clinical study and all those things, but also being a part of this conversation and sharing their lives and their experiences so openly. This panel conversation was recorded live, and at this point in the event, we had turned it back over to Fernanda, who was able to entertain some questions from those in attendance of the event.
Thank you, Sean, and thanks everybody. I think we could just keep listening to you, and I thank you so much for your generosity in sharing your learnings, your experience, your advice. We are lucky to be communicating with you, and you have been so open. And I know that the teams would welcome you to continue to co-develop these therapies with us. I have a number of questions coming in from the company. I'll start with this one. So for all three of you, having participated in a clinical trial for several years now, I know that it has been many years for Kim and as well as Darren, and coming on to 2 years for you, Jordan. What do you know now that you wish you knew back then prior to making your decision?
I can speak to that, I guess. I wish I knew how harsh chemo was, honestly. Like, chemo was terrible. I never, ever want to go through that ever again. It's different for everybody, though. Like, I know patient 2, it wasn't as harsh. Me, I had sores in my mouth and sores all down my throat, and I couldn't eat for the longest while, and I didn't have any taste for probably a month and a half. But once that was over, I was very happy, I guess. The tests and everything, they were a lot of tests, but you have to do what you have to do, like, they don't know anything about this stem cell transplant. They're learning as much every day as I am. So it's just, basically just the chemo. I wish I knew how harsh that was.
And the reason it's so important for you to tell us that is that so we can do everything that we can to make this process as easy and as less painful as possible for future participants. So thank you for sharing that. Darren and Kim?
Frankly, I'm struggling to think of what I wish I'd known now that I didn't know then. I mean, I think I really feel like I came in really well educated to it. I read all the disclosure information. I literally gotten, like, my sister lives not far from where Dr. Badine's lab is. I went up and saw him before I did this, and I figured, I'm gonna look this dude in the eye and make sure that he looked confident. And I also, he arranged for me to talk to the doctors in charge of sort of doing these bone marrow stem cell transplants. So I felt like I came in educated, and I felt like I wasn't surprised by anything. So it was, it was kind of as I expected. The chemo for me wasn't as bad as what Jordan's described. Maybe the words of advice, if there is some, is, this is a relatively short period of time that hopefully has an impact for the rest of your life. So yeah, it wasn't that much fun not seeing friends and family for like quite a number of weeks while you had low immunity because you had to be careful. It's only a few weeks. And frankly, we've been avoiding family and friends for like a year and a half now. So it was just a little bit of training for COVID.
I know the rare disease community is so resilient and prepared for COVID.
Yeah, so to build kind of what on Darren was saying, I mean, there's so many things that I wish I had known. And I've definitely gotten smarter as each year we've gone through the clinical trial. But one of the main things I tell parents and people going through clinical trial is don't have expectations for that day that you're in clinic. Don't schedule other things. Don't plan on picking your kids up from school. You've got to make other arrangements, all of these sorts of details, because I know I really frustrated myself so much my first couple of years because I was working. I've been working full time the whole time, but I would try to schedule meetings and, the labs would run late or the MRI team or the anesthesia team wasn't there. And that just would add to my frustration because I was trying to multitask. And really, I just tell people it's going to go, something's going to go wrong. Somebody's going to be running late on those days that you're in clinic, that you're at the hospital. Really try to limit what else you've planned for that day because it'll really help your stress level for you and for your child, or if you're the patient, for you as well. So that's the big number one thing is just don't plan other things those days.
So, Kim, you're touching on such an important topic, which is expectations and commitment for a clinical trial, which leads us to our next question. And I think there is so much we can learn in that topic, which is if we can hear from all of you, what is the commitment in participating in a clinical trial?
Yeah, I'll I will have to say that, 6.5, 7 years is not the typical time for a clinical trial. This clinical trial that Cole's in has actually been going on for 11 years, and there was some problem with the endpoints, and that's why it's continued to go on. But some of our other clinical trials, I think you have to be very upfront as a company and say, here's your time commitment. It's 6 months, and then we're going to get you home, or it's 3 months, or you're going to be. I always like to have, if I come and I work with all the different companies that are running clinical trials in our area, and say, here's your time commitment. Here's the days you'll be in clinic. Here are the days that are free. As much information as you can give is just so helpful, because you're not running a clinical trial in a vacuum. You're having to balance your other children's needs, your work needs, maybe a spouse's needs, all of these different things you're juggling. So as much information as you can get and stay on schedule is just so helpful. Yeah.
You said a lot there. And so for the audiences who are listening to us now, if that's okay to say, I don't know if we covered this, but Co is participating in an intrathecal clinical trial for Hunter syndrome, right?
That's
so
right.
It's ERT, intrathecal injection.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Same question for Jordan. On commitment, what is required of you? Because I know you've had to travel long distance.
Yeah, so I live in Alberta, Canada, and I was going to San Diego for the trial. And my commitment, I was there for roughly 4 months, and I lived in a hotel, and I had to take off work for 4 months. I had to have someone look after my house for 4 months. It was a very huge commitment. But I have 7 siblings, and there was always people checking on my house. We all live in the same town. There's like 700 people in my town. So my family basically makes up like a quarter, because it's that small. But yeah, I had a lot of help. So
say if you were, your age, but then you were married and you had 2 children and you had to go through that, because you talked about you needed a lot of support. So how can we ensure that gene therapy becomes something that can reach many people in the world, and not just, the far and few between who are able to take 4 months off work and things like that? If you can just, all of you, tell us, what could be possible, knowing that, that industry is a highly regulated environment, and so are clinical trials. We would love to hear your advice on making it easier.
Yeah, I hope one day that everybody gets cured. That would be absolutely amazing. But I know that it's almost like going to be impossible for people to get cured all over the world. Like there's people in Brazil and people in, I guess, Afghanistan that have cystinosis that I was talking to, and they don't even have pills. They can't even get pills. And I was in a trial in Chicago too for 7 years, and I was on 2 different kinds of pills. And now I just did a stem cell transplant. Like I'm very, very lucky where how some kids don't even have pills. And I feel like, I feel kind of bad for, I have all this opportunity and they don't even have any opportunity.
Yeah. I think you have to look at each family individually as well. And really do that sort of research up front and talking with them and understand their circumstances. As we've started talking about moving clinical trials to older kids, well, those kids might be more involved. They might be in a wheelchair. So we're going to have wheelchair accessible vans, and we're going to have equipment that we're going to have to fly out. And you really need to know what you're sort of getting into with the family. Do they have other siblings? Are they going to be taken care of? How are they going to be supported? Are they going to be coming out for that? I've also been talking to pharmaceutical companies about, it's getting close to August. As we get closer to August, schools letting out, schools back in, making sure that there's a plan for that, for the kids to be in school and not miss school. So I think you really have to look at each individual family. I would love for us to bring telehealth more in so that we can reach those parts of the country where they don't have specialists, or, where you're working a 9-to-5 job and you don't have that flexibility to take off, because if you take off, you're losing money. And I understand my privilege because I was working for a large company and I could take my computer with me, and that was my job. But not everybody has that ability. So it'd be great if we could really start to look at not only diversity across the country, but also socioeconomic diversity as well.
All excellent points. So I think, to what Jordan said about Brazil, and I think Kim already touched on this, like there's parts of Canada and the US that most definitely have large numbers of people that just couldn't take the time off. They just, if you're at the margins financially, how do you take 4 months off? So I've got a tremendous amount of privilege in that, my wife works, I work, we both have flexible jobs. We were able to really kind of commit ourselves to this. There was a tremendous amount of support offered. Like they did come and talk to us about, are we going to be okay financially? Are we going to be okay, mentally, depression, all those sorts of important issues. They had thought through having someone be available as a resource. But I think ultimately to make this something that is available to those that don't have the financial wherewithal to park themselves for a couple of months. I'm not sure what the answer is, but perhaps that just has to be built into the cost of the treatment. There's if the person's going to come and get the treatment, then the treatment costs X, but the caring for the person such that they can actually access the treatment costs whatever 0.2x or something. So the total cost is 1.2x.
Picking the accountant, Darren.
There you go. Can't help myself.
Yes, no, that's really all of you really helpful insights. I agree. I don't think I had thought about it like that, but maybe if we can be realistic and open about that part, and the expectation, we might be able to move the needle and be able to access more people. So thanks for sharing your thoughts. Very helpful. Back to, I think, Jordan, because he talked about all the people who helped him, who provided support for your trial while participating in the trial.
There was tons of people that provided support. There was the cystinosis community. My mom was there for 3 months out of the 4. My sibling, I was actually there through Christmas too, and my siblings came down for Christmas and visited me. Dr. Shirky's office too. I know I had their number, and if there was ever a problem, they were always on speed dial. If it was 2 a.m., they were always right there to answer. I don't really think that my nurse slept either. She told me that she only slept 3 hours a night, and that was her usual. So it kind of worked out. If there was ever a problem, I wasn't afraid that she was sleeping because she was always awake. And the hotel people too, I became really good friends with them. I go back to San Diego every 6 months, and every time I go, they're like, "Oh, hey, it's you." And so they know me, and they're always checking up on my room too to see if I'm still good and everything's okay. And I made a lot of friends down there.
Nice. Darren?
Yeah, I've got fabulous family support, fabulous wife. My friends all know and knew what I was going through. I'm kind of the view of, let's gather up all the people that can help you and pull them into the team. So the medical people were great, family's great, friends were great. I'm very, very fortunate and privileged to have had the sort of financial wherewithal that wasn't a problem or a worry for me. So I was able to, using one of the sayings my wife and I use is play to win. So we were able to play to win in terms of make sure I don't get sick, avoid people. I had my treatment in January. I didn't go to Christmas dinner with our family because I didn't want to risk getting sick, 10 days before I was supposed to do chemo, which would have botched, the whole thing and it wouldn't have happened. So, yeah, that's not nice, but it's not that big of a deal. And look what I got from it. So lots and lots of support on my side, which I'm very, very fortunate to have.
And it talks again about the considerations you had to have prior to going into this trial or during the trial, the process. So thank you. Kim, would you like to add something to the question?
Yeah. So, much like Darren and Jordan, we would travel to UNC Chapel Hill, which is about 5.5 hours from our home in Knoxville, every month. So we got to know the hotel people, right? They knew what Cole liked, and Cole even got to a point where they had 4 suites, and he would run to the suite because he knew exactly where they were going to put us. And then there was a cook there that would make cookies for him. And you get to know the staff because you're seeing them all the time. And then, of course, Dr. Munzer, who was the PI, and Ms. Cole's geneticist. He's just wonderful. He's the first person I think I've told him I have 4 different contact ways to get hold of him. But I need that too, because if Cole gets in the hospital, that's the first person I'm going to text and let know. But the biggest thing I think was the other families that were in the clinical trial, that we have a Facebook group and we talk all the time. And, we're all talking, hey, who's going to be in Chicago? Who's going to be in UNC? And we want to meet up because we've been together for years and years, and we've created our own sort of family and support that. And that's been tremendous, because we've been able to share symptoms, or, we'll show pictures of any, whatever it may be, like inflammation at the site, and say, is this normal? Have you seen this? And, we're really sort of cheering each other on and helping each other. And I think that has been, especially as we're parents and we're trying to, a lot of our kids can't tell us what is wrong, to be able to share our knowledge with each other.
Is that a hard thing? Because in these rare diseases communities, they are so tight-knit. Not speaking about clinical trials about adverse events or things like that on social media. Is that an issue? Is there such a thing?
Well, you're not going to keep people from talking about it. But there's a difference between, that's a very closed community. It's only the people in the clinical trial. And we would not talk about that in an open community, because we would not want to do anything to jeopardize the trial, or to jeopardize anyone else's response. We're really just there to support each other. We don't talk about any sort of politics around the trial. It's really, we're just concerned about our kids and how they're doing. And I think that's important to have those sorts of support groups. But as far as I've been seeing, I haven't seen anyone talking openly, just on their own pages about being in a clinical trial and all those sorts of things. So, a warning is okay, that you don't want to say something out on your Facebook page that's going to send the stock up or down. That's what I always talk to people. Don't say that. But, talking about how your individual child is doing, I think is fine.
Thanks. And you've all talked about this last topic, coming from AVROBIO, again, from Sharon, our Vice President of Quality. If you can talk a little bit more about the impact that it has on your families, on the participating in clinical trials. What's the toll that it has on marriages, other family issues, and any advice how to navigate these dynamics?
Yeah, so when I was younger, it was very hard on my family. I know, like, if I wasn't feeling good, I was always the type of kid to push myself, even if I wasn't feeling good. And if we were about to go do something as a family and I wasn't feeling good, my mom would say, "Oh, let's actually just hang out. I don't really want to go." But she would be saying that because she could tell I wasn't feeling good, but she would never tell me that. And she actually, after my stem cell transplant, she's been telling me a few things, and it's kind of all coming together now. And I know when I went to San Diego too, it was really hard on my family back home. Like me and my sister are very close, and my whole family and I are very close, basically. And I know my sister was crying almost every day, and we were FaceTiming and basically just keeping in touch, because I was so far away. She didn't know how I was doing. It was an experimental trial. If I was in her end, I would be scared too, and she's losing her little brother for 4 months.
Thank you.
Well, I think, try and be a real team sort of approach to it. Certainly, my family knew what I was doing. They didn't read the disclosure statement, but I explained the stuff to them. My wife was fully involved. So, being upfront so they kind of understand it all. And then I can't remember the 4 C's now, but we had some acronym that we'd come up with. But basically, my wife was in charge of, keeping the place clean so I didn't get sick while it was happening. Compliance, I had, making sure I took everything that I was meant to take. And then the key one for family was communications. So she had to keep my family updated on what was going on, or they for sure would have been asking. Yeah.
Very important. Kim, anything?
Yeah. I mean, it's very rough. I think we're going back and forth for that first year plus of going to North Carolina for a week, and I have another son who's 2 years older than Cole, and I'd always been at everything, and it's you're going to miss certain things. So it was odd for me, like his piano recital. I remember thinking that's terrible. I want to be there for everything, and I miss this. And so I called on my aunt and uncle, and I said, "Hey, can you be there for Connor for this event?" Because I knew I was missing that, and we really called upon the school quite a bit, where I would tell his teachers, hey, I'm out of town this week with Cole at this clinical trial. Connor needs a little extra attention, or if you see something going on, let me know, because you really have to have that whole support system and really helping you out, especially if you're not there to check on him as often and really be there for him. And with Cole's had extended hospital stays, we were at Vanderbilt for 6 weeks, unexpected. And again, it was that you've got to have other people, you have to ask for help. And I'm not a person that asks for help. So it was very difficult for me to say, you know what, I can't manage this on my own. And there are people that want to help. And going back to one of those lessons, Fernanda, that, you want to tell people is, don't just say, I need help. Be very specific about what you need, because people want to help and they'll say, oh, let me know if you want any help. You have to be like, okay, here's what I'd like you to do, and give them something very specific to do. And they love that. But otherwise, you're not going to hear, no one's going to keep in touch with you and say, I want to follow up on that helping. One of my friends, she just called me and said, Kim, I'm bringing over dinner for the family on this day. And I was like, wow, that was amazing, right? She's not asking me if she can do it. She just did it. And that's what you have to sort of surround yourself with, people that just do it and they just get it, so that you're not having to ask all the time.
Thanks, Kim. I can't even describe how deeply personal and what a monumental decision it is to participate in these clinical trials. And life has this way of making you make decisions really fast. And you all three of you have shown bravery and how you had to make this choice. So thank you so much.
You guys have been fabulous. Thank you very much for joining us today. And of course, to the AVROBIO team for sponsoring the conversation and allowing us to just shed some light into what it means and what it takes to be a part of trials, and really to be a part of the journey to treatments and cures that hopefully are going to come about down the road. Thank you very much.
I agree. I am proud that these are 3 people that are leading the charge to get treatments and cures for so many thousands of other people. And to the folks at AVROBIO, if it's not clear, if it wasn't clear before, maybe it is now, that there is nothing more important you could be doing with your life than searching for treatments and cures for all of us and for so many people. So thank you so much for having us, and keep up the good work.
Hey, thanks for listening today, and ultimately, thank you for the sacrifices and contributions you and your families make. We know that so many of our listeners are helping move the needle towards cures and treatments one way or another. Be sure to use our show notes for more information on AVROBIO, and as always, keep living with urgency.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to donate.
Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app.